It is a known joke in the developer community to test in production. Why is that? Well, a lot of people think it's too late to test then. And the users are then testing it, and so they might have a bad experience and it might break production. And breaking production is definitely not a good thing because that's a terrible user experience. However, sometimes we need production data to test our changes properly, and testing in production would be super useful and much more of a thorough test. Is this possible? And if yes, how can it be achieved? TLDR, yes, this is possible and can be achieved by decoupling deployments and releases. This is best done using a feature flag tool. My feature flag tool of choice is the open source project Flagsmith. And by wrapping a new feature in a feature flag that's only shown to certain users or groups of users like maintainers, you can confidently and safely test in production, as it won't affect any other users on the platforms. Here I've got an example. On the right, you can see I'm logged in and I've been given access to this feature, and you can see I see these two graphs. On the left, I'm going to the same URL and I'm not logged in. I don't see those graphs. And it's not because I'm logged in and logged out, it's because my user has been given permission to be a beta tester user, or whatever you want to call the feature flag. That's entirely up to you. So in this video, we're going to be building on my Next.js app router project that uses the open source project Flagsmith. I'm using their cloud, but you can also self-host it. And this is the open source health check project, where you can submit your open source project, where you can get feedback on how good it is. For example, if we actually scroll down and pick the health check project and it's been tested on the health check project, you can see we've got one error. And if I scroll down, you can see the error is labels. We don't have any custom labels. And we've got a couple of warnings too as well. Go check out the project, link in the description below, and let me know what you think and how your open source project looks like after the report. We are adding new checks all the time, so your feedback is super helpful. Right, let's get coding. And just to show you how important testing on production is, as taboo as that might sound, is I have noticed a bug. So locally, I have very limited data, but now I've put it in production. I've actually noticed that the newer date is on the left. But because I only had a single date, I didn't notice that before locally. So testing in production with real data is important. And no one else sees this apart from me, or if I allow other people like maintainers to see it. So there are two steps to this process. One is adding the feature flag to Flagsmith dashboard, and the second step is wrapping our code in the feature flag. Let's start off with the dashboard. But before we head to the dashboard, let me show you that locally I have got two browsers again. On the right, I'm logged in. I can see the graphs. On the left, I'm not logged in, and I can also see the graphs. So we haven't wrapped this in the feature flag yet. This is what we're going to do together. So let's head over to the dashboard and actually see how it looks. So you can log in into Flagsmith for free using your GitHub account or the other logins they have available. I logged in with my GitHub, and then you can create a new feature and you can call it whatever you want. Remember, you're going to refer to this in your code. So I'm going to call this platform stats, and each feature can have two pieces of information. Is it enabled, disabled? And does it have a value? So for example, with caching, enabled, disabled doesn't really matter. It's always going to be cached, but the value is the amount of hours. And I have some more content on that coming out soon. So do subscribe below if you want to learn more on how we are able to control caching in real time for different users. But in this case, I just think we need enabled, disabled. So I want it disabled by default. So every user will have it disabled, and I only enable it when we need it for that user. So that's it. And I can give it a description. For example, public beta list to show graphs. And I can hit create. So now that is created. And there are two ways you can enable this for a user or a group of user. One is you could do a segment override where you would create segments of users, for example, admin, maintainers, beta testers, etc. You would create those in the segment section. And then when you go to your feature flag, you can go to the segment override and actually add it to that feature flag. Or you can go to identities and see the individual users, and then in the feature flag, enable it for them. So for example, if we go back to the platform stats and go to identity overrides, you can see that I've just enabled this for me, for a specific user rather than the group. So there's so many different ways you can use this building block. So now that is done, we're gonna go into the coding part, which is just as straightforward. But one thing just to note, you do have different environments. You've got development, production, and you can create some more. So that way, you're only changing data for your development, not your production. So when you deploy and you use your production keys, if the data looks different, it's because you need to set it up. But when you create a feature, it does appear in both environments, but the value is decoupled from each other. Right, let's get back to coding. So this is the component, platform.js, that gives us the platform statistics that we see over here. So what we want to do is we want to import Flagsmith. So we could say import use flags from Flagsmith. Oh, thank you for the autocomplete. Awesome. And then we can come down here and we can get that flag and we can do a check. Do we return the graphs or do we just return an empty value? I have already set up Flagsmith for this project. I already have a blog post and a video on that. So do check those out in the link below if you want to see how to set it up, but it is also really straightforward as well. So to get the flag, we can say const. We use the same name, platform stats, that we use on Flagsmith when we created the feature. And that is equal to use flags, which in this case, we pass in an array of the flags that we want. And in this case is platform stats. And then what we want to do is say platform stats.enabled, not .value, because we don't actually want the value of it, which is empty. We actually want to know if it's enabled for that user or not. And if it is not enabled, then just return. And that should now work. So if I bring up Chrome again, undefined is not an object. What have I done? Typo here as well, not doing so good today. Now hit save, now it should work. Always read the error when you get an error. So you can see the graph as we expected before. And if we go over to here where I'm not logged in, there is no graph. So now it is working. But one thing I did change, and I just remembered that I did this before the video, is you need to specify a bit more information about the user. So therefore, in the Flagsmith dashboard, you can identify that user a little bit more. And so one thing that I'll show you that we've done in our Flagsmith kind of client, what we have done is we have added, if there's a session, use the user ID. So therefore we can target that user specifically. As I showed you here, with the identities, I've targeted mine, so that's my user ID. But in the same time, I'm also passing in a trait, and a trait is a key value pair of additional information that you want to pass about the user. So here I've passed is a maintainer, and I'm passing it from our database. And so that way we could also then go to segment overrides and say, if they're a maintainer, also show this feature to be enabled. So yes, there's lots of ways you can do this. It is so interesting and it's super fun. I love having these building blocks and be able to do different things with it. But for the moment, I'm just doing it for my user, as we don't have too many maintainers on the project, and I've coded this and I wanted to test it myself on production. So to conclude, yes, you can test in production safely. Previously, this was such a negative thing to do. I mean, it was just so negative. Test in production, it was a joke, ha ha ha. But with modern development practices, it's actually safe and positive. You can see this is fully implemented in the open source health check repo. Link in the description below, and there's a blog as well if you're interested in reading about it and see how I've done that, but in text format rather than video. I look forward to geeking out with you on the open source health check repo. Come and join us in the AD Hub community. I'll see you there.